at the moment, smart city strategies or urban innovation strategies or community innovation strategies at the moment that they only focus on the best, the most powerful, the most digitalized,
Mhm.
the more exclusive it's going to become. And one of the most important lessons that come with smart cities is that they have to be inclusive. We found out as much through COVID-19.
Mhm.
If there were municipalities providing digital services to their citizens, it was good enough to see a good number of citizens embrace those digital services. With COVID-19, it has become fundamentally clear that a good percentage is not good enough. You need to get actually everyone on board. It
Correct.
has to be fully inclusive. Otherwise, you're going to leave people out.
Mm.
And so I think this is the fresh insight that has really dawned on all of us, that smart cities will not be smart if they're not fully inclusive.
Correct. Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. If you're new to our channel, please consider subscribing to it and hit the bell icon so that you never miss an update. I am your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm privileged to welcome a very, very accomplished individual from the Netherlands, Bas Boorsma.
Thank you so much, Ashutosh. It's a pleasure being here.
Thank you. Bas is a guru of smart cities and smart communities. He's a professor of practice at the Thunderbird School of Global Management in Arizona. He's an urban innovator, historian by education, yet it is the future which is my canvas, and these are his own words. So, Bas, let's talk about smart city and smart community. For our viewers and listeners, tell us what is a smart city and what is a smart community?
A smart city is generally considered to be a city that leverages digital technologies to improve the quality of life and general human conduct within those urban environments. Now, that's the short definition.
Correct.
I would maintain it's actually a little bit less about technology. Yes, it's about innovation. It's about innovation agendas
Mhm.
that will actually improve our communities and our cities to actually achieve that next level of sustainability and agility, resilience needed to survive in this next era. So
Okay.
that's what it is. And a smart community differs from a smart city in a sense that it's not just about cities. It can also be about villages or regions. And I think it's a very important point to make in this space that it is, in fact, not just about cities, that this is
Okay.
something, a development that really touches all of us.
Okay. So help me understand a little more about smart cities. I mean, I don't know much, but every time I read about a smart city, I just assume it's something to do with technology. Is that the case?
Technology is a very important component, and the very notion of the smart city really got started with the advance of digital technologies pretty early 2000s. What will it mean if everyone gets a broadband connection? What does it mean for education, healthcare, our energy grids, mobility? If we apply digital to a level where we're going to be able to completely rethink
Hmm.
how human conduct takes place in our urban environments and beyond. So that's always been the starting point.
Hmm.
But as the mayor of Genoa in Italy once stated, Baz, I love your vision of a smart city, but if an analog solution is enough to get me to where I want to be, then good enough that will be. So
Correct.
it's not always about technology, it's not always about digital
Mm.
technologies.
And in a smart city, I'm assuming, of course, there's the entire thing of environment and governance and, reprocessing waste, etc., etc. But how important is it for the concept of the smart city to be accepted by the weakest link in the human chain?
It's very important because at the moment you don't do that, at the moment, smart city strategies or urban innovation strategies or community innovation strategies at the moment that they only focus on the best, the most powerful, the most digitalized,
Mhm.
the more exclusive it's going to become. And one of the most important lessons that come with smart cities is that they have to be inclusive. We found out as much through COVID-19.
Hmm.
If there were municipalities providing digital services to their citizens, it was good enough to see a good number of citizens embrace those digital services. With COVID 19, it has become fundamentally clear that a good percentage is not good enough. You need to get actually everyone on board. It has
Correct.
to be fully inclusive. Otherwise, you're going to leave people out.
Mm.
And so I think this is the fresh insight that has really dawned on all of us, that smart cities will not be smart if they're not fully inclusive.
Correct. Correct. Very well said. In fact, I have was talking on a television channel the other day, and I said that as far as COVID is concerned, no one is safe till everyone is safe. And I think that's exactly what you're saying.
Exactly. Exactly. And this lesson applied to so many spaces. If next generation mobility is not understood or embraced by everyone, then who are we leaving out of that
Correct.
solution?
Correct.
And that question is just again and again and again one of the principal design questions
Hmm.
for any smart city strategy.
Okay. Okay. So moving on, Bas. Now, when I was reading about you, you state that our world is changing at a dramatic pace. Um, while I understand the underlying spirit of the statement, can you help me understand this with some examples?
Sure, absolutely. So I think first of all, the speed at which digital has come into our lives.
Hmm.
Just go back 30 years ago, most of us were just discovering something called the internet.
Correct.
That's just a very, very small amount of time.
Mm.
And since then, our lives have changed. The way we educate ourselves, the way we befriend, the way we provide healthcare services, the way we store data, the way we think of mobility or security, all of these things have moved at an incredible pace. They have just changed completely. If you were born after the birth of the internet, there is simply no comparison. It's always been like that. But if you were born before that, you're going to know the difference. You, Ashutosh, you know the difference. I know the difference. And I always joke that I was born in the year 29 before Google, pointing out that I'm that old and therefore firmly with one leg in that old world. I know how fast the world has changed. But more to the point and to the right in the here and the now. Again to COVID 19. Look at what digitalization combined with COVID 19 has done to the world of work. Never in the history of humanity
Hmm.
has become the world of work more time and place independent.
Yeah.
It's what has just happened in a matter of 1.5 years.
Yeah.
It's just revolutionary. It also in terms of the data analytics in healthcare, our perspective, our society-wide perspective
Mm-hmm.
as to how to manage public health and how to prepare for the next pandemic has
Hmm.
changed forever. Nothing of the sort would have happened without digitalization. And one more argument I should touch, and it's again because we are in the middle of this COVID 19 pandemic, unfortunately. It is a good example. Had COVID 19 struck 20 years ago,
Mm.
how fast would have our global medical research have been? How fast would have been our public responses? How fast would have been able to produce a vaccine that works? Much of this is due to digitalization. So yes, I would actually hold true to that somewhat abstract statement that it is happening at a dramatic speed.
You're so right. I mean, I was watching a very old film of the Spanish flu, and I was thinking myself, had digital not been here, we may have faced a similar pandemic, um, as bad as the Spanish flu 20 years ago. You're
Absolutely.
absolutely right. So, based on all your research on the smart communities, as well as the smart cities, what, according to you, are some of the challenges we as humans face in our cities today?
So the cities have always been the center stage of innovation, of business, of education,
Mm.
and that certainly applies today. But it has become amplified. Cities continue to grow by and large. There are places in the world where cities are becoming smaller, but generally cities are becoming larger.
Mhm.
Take India, take China, take cities in Africa. They become just simply quite a bit larger, which means that the economic pressures are higher. Um, In a city like Delhi, you would need to build a new hospital like every other half a year in order to keep up with the growth of the population.
Absolutely.
There is no way in just doing that in an old school fashion. You have to think of digital ways of actually delivering on that.
Mm.
So cities are carried that brunt, but also the honor of being the places where innovation happened first. I also think that by and large, cities have become much more of a geography of innovation compared to where cities stood 40 years ago. Silicon Valley wasn't really quite a city now, was it? It was built around university campuses. But today you actually see that inner city centers actually have become the dynamo of innovations, of new ideas, much more than those old university campuses. That combined with the exposure to citizens, startups, all of that converging in those cities, boy, have they become ever more important. So when you think of smart cities, it's important to stand in embrace of that notion of the geography innovation, but also the incredible pressures that cities find themselves in.
Interesting. And you have run several smart city engagements. Could you give me an example of what you really did and what was the outcome and what were some of your challenges?
So a lot of things revolved around building proof of concepts and pilots that demonstrated to people what the future was going to hold. So first, I think one of the major outcomes of all of that work of 15 years of smart city development has been to educate people, educate leaders, educate peers and professionals, but also average citizens being able to touch new solutions, being able to touch an arena or a sensor or a device or something with an outcome that would impact people's lives. I think that's really been incredible because it helped set agendas. It helped to reframe regulatory frameworks. It helped to reframe development strategies for an entire cities and regions. So that's been among the most important output. But I would say that I'll give you a practical example, Ashutosh. Back in my Cisco days, in the mid 2000s, we had a number of proof of concepts that we built together with the cities of San Francisco, Amsterdam, and Seoul, Korea. And we built something called the Eco Map, where you could see the actual eco footprint from one street to another in the actual cities involved.
Right.
In those days, that was an incredible innovation, and it just completely reframed the thinking of the leaders involved. Boy, if this is what we can do now, then how will this help us actually monitor the sustainability within our cities and the energy consumption? We also built a smart work center, the third work location beyond working from home or the traditional office. Now, today, we do this all the time. We go to coffee shops, we go to dedicated business centers where we work from. The third workspace environment, especially in the COVID years, has
Mm.
become mainstream. But 15 years ago, this was an absolute revolution. And I think many of those early smart city initiatives helped us get there. More recent, it's been a lot around the Internet of Things,
Mm.
around street automation and efficiencies. What's ahead and what I see happen in smart city engagements in the near future is much more around data, citizen engagement, inclusion models. So much more on the social side. How do
Mm.
we directly benefit citizens, not just with some particular efficiency,
Mhm.
but in terms of actual social value to the city?
Mm.
And so this is some of the, let's say, critical outcomes that I see emerge out of smart city engagements, among which some of those that I've run myself.
Fascinating. So, when our prime minister started his first term, he announced 100 smart cities, new cities would be created. And there was a lot of debate that why must a smart city have to be new? Can an old city become a smart city?
Oh,
Your
most
thoughts?
definitely. Most definitely. For anyone that wants to pick up a book or two, my advice would be to read, if you haven't read it, The Death and Life of Great American City by the ever great Jane Jacobs, who
Okay.
wrote this in the early 60s. And her point was that too much planning of cities is actually not good for humanity.
Mm.
That actually there is a magic mix to the density of people that
Mhm.
live together in old cities. In that sense, effective, real smart cities are not the ones that necessarily are invented from scratch,
Mm.
but that are able to augment the authentic
Okay.
human concentrations in old cities
Mm.
through innovations, new technologies, new business models, and other types of innovations. So the answer must be yes, absolutely. Smart city thinking should primarily and first of all be applied to existing communities in
Mm.
all of their beauty and colorfulness.
Mm. Very interesting. So I'm now going to move to another set of topics, and you have spoken quite a few times about digital. So my next few questions relate to the digital economy. Uh, my question to you, Abbas, is what are some of the opportunities that have been thrown up by the pandemic for the digital world?
I think that what we have seen happen, what got accelerated, and what was already emerging over the past several decades
Hmm.
in an incremental way, but that really got accelerated through the pandemic is, let's say, the virtualization of things that we care about. The city itself, for starters, the place and time independency
Mm.
of urban services, of work, of education. We
Mm.
were forced to work from home and so on, but it's been a revolution. We have shifted massively in one pull away from the traditional office to
Mhm.
work from different places. This does not apply to everyone, but for knowledge workers, this has become a major truism. So I think this is an example where you can really see, look, it was there. People were working. You had digital nomads and people working from home and smart work environments. But now, since COVID-19, this revolution has really accelerated ourselves. It leapfrogged ourselves with at least 6 years into the future in
Mhm.
terms of how we work. Now, things of many other things that we consider to be urban entertainment, shopping, all of these things have become virtualized, digitalized to a very great extent for all of these things to become genuinely
Mm.
time and place independent. And I do not believe that these will go back into the physical realm. The
Mm.
physical realm will coexist next to the digital realm, but it's become much more, and the digital realm, in that sense, has become more mature. And a last important point that I would like to point out per your question is that data analytics has become fundamentally important during COVID
Right.
19. Understanding where the pressures are, understanding where crowds of people are, understanding what economic activity is up and what economic activity is gone down in order to mitigate the COVID 19 crisis effectively.
Mm.
What we have learned from that, and probably that's not going to go away, is to also build our economic recovery model based on data analytics.
Mm.
If, for instance, like in my own city in Amsterdam, it's very clear that a lot of people that worked in restaurants, bars have lost their jobs. But as these restaurants and bars reopen, will those people still be there? What
Right.
other jobs have they moved into? If
Mm.
you do not run your data analytics on
Mm.
that sufficiently well, you will be underprepared to actually come up with an economic recovery plan that will work.
Mm.
So the data analytics that we got to use at an accelerated level through COVID-19, that same model needs to apply for our current futures.
Amazing. So one more question for you before I move to the next segment. You know, you're a professor and you work with a lot of millennials and Gen Zs. My question to you is how are the millennials and the Gen Zs looking at the future and changing it?
Let me give you a small anecdote.
Mm.
Just before the COVID-19 crisis kicked in, I was talking for the World Bank Summit for Young Leadership.
Mhm.
And they were from everywhere, from India, from Africa, from
Mm.
Latin America. It was an incredible crowd coming together in Washington, D.C.
Mhm.
And they were running workshop, building smart community strategies, highly interdisciplinary, very collaborative in nature, being able to think out of the box. And when I was done with one of those workshops, which only took half a day, and they had arrived at incredible conclusions,
Mhm.
I told them, and I told them publicly, in my training of current leadership in municipalities, what typically takes me 3 days, you guys do in like one afternoon.
Wow.
The ability of those younger generations to think out of silos, out of single disciplinary approaches,
Mm.
away from single disciplinary approaches, away from individual work to collaborative work within a peer environment. This
Mhm.
is something that the younger generations do so much better. And this is part of the magic set of ingredients to bake the cake of our futures. If you think of smart community strategies, it has to be multidisciplinary in nature. It has to be emotionally intelligent in nature also, because if you fail to go to people and listen to them, those strategies won't work. It's that combined set of abilities that the younger generations feature above all, and therefore my hopes are high.
Very high, very, very good. And I completely agree with what you're saying on this. So, Bas, I'm going to move to the next segment, but there are a few questions for you personally. I think I have time for three, maybe four questions. Uh, my first question to you is that, Cisco, teaching, professor, smart cities, you're doing such a lot of amazing stuff. As you look at life, what would you think are three key milestones in your life or your career?
Um, that's a tough choice actually, but
Mhm.
probably one thing to start out with is I started my career in the early 90s being part of the United Nations peacekeeping operation in
Oh, wow.
Cambodia.
Okay.
I ended up living there for 3.5 years. And one thing that fascinated me with Cambodia, given the incredible nightmare that that country has gone through,
Correct.
the absolute genocide that happened there, is the ability of human beings to be resilient and step up efforts, survive, and
Yeah.
rebuild. And sometimes the quality of human beings to rebuild, to be resilient, will be required because of a human crisis or a
Hmm.
genocide, but it can also be required as a result of living an industrial revolution. And
Mm.
we are living an industrial revolution. Some people call it the fourth industrial revolution. It leaves us deeply uncomfortable
Hmm.
with change around us. And we have got to become comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Correct.
And that is something that Cambodians have always done very well
Mm.
from my experience. This is something that I learned in that episode.
Mhm.
It's become life defining. My years in Cambodia were life defining. Then another one is the birth of my three boys. I'm father to three sons, and they're beautiful boys. And as with every father son relationship, the father learns more from the boys than the boys learn
Absolutely
from
right.
their father. So
Yes.
that's an incredible component.
Mm.
And the last one is the actual writing and finally publication of my book, A New Digital Deal, which came out in 2017. And then the 2020 edition came out last year. What was important about that is it was a source of pride to see that book out there, but there was something beyond the actual it going public. If only there had been only one edition coming out of that, just one book printed physically
Mhm.
in all of that, it would have already had that enormous value and being on that list of the three most important things,
Mm.
because you only know what you think once you write it down.
Correct.
And that's been a monumental component for me.
Absolutely. Fantastic. My next question to you is on success. And I know the definition of success changes throughout our life. But from where you stand today, what does success mean to Bas?
Making a difference in just those few words, making a difference.
Mhm.
I do not believe that one should hunt for happiness. I
Mhm.
don't believe in that journey. I don't believe necessarily in material wealth. It's great to have it, but if I can make a difference on a daily basis, then that truly matters to me. Whether I teach, whether I run a smart city community engagement, whether I write a book and other people benefit from it, all of these things, I need to wake up and look myself in the mirror and be able to answer the question positively. Do I make a difference?
Fantastic. And my last question to you, and this is a question on failure. I've just published a new book on failure also. Uh, and I've had this long held hypothesis that in the part of the world that I come from, which is South Asia, East Asia, parents don't teach children it's okay to fail. We're always told, come first in class, go to the head of the line, etc., etc. And yet we fail, we learn, and we keep moving on. My question to you, Bas, is what have been some of your learnings from some of your mistakes?
So I ran plenty of smart city engagements where
Mhm.
we build solutions, pilots, great new ideas, being totally drunk on our own Kool-Aid,
Mhm.
believing, and that's a typical engineering perspective also, that we had created something marvelous.
Right.
The biggest failure with that is that you actually fail to test your own assumptions and actually have not gone to the people that it was built for and have
Mhm.
failed to listen to what these people care about. One of the most important lessons I was taught by a chief innovation officer in a city in the United States
Mhm.
is go to where people are and listen to, understand the people, not just have a conversation with them, but go where they are, understand their context, truly listen, test your own assumptions, and spend about 90% of your time in building whatever innovation or solution you had in mind. Just doing that. And I failed at numerous times in my past doing that. I built great things which then kind of half baked worked, didn't work, and because we failed to have a proper conversation, understanding the context of the people that were going to be the prime users of that solution.
Mhm.
That is something that will not happen to me very often again, I hope.
Well done. Thank you so much, Bas. It's been such a pleasure speaking to you. I just love the way you defined yourself as 29 years before Google. And I was thinking, maybe we should be changing from BCE to BGE, before Google era and after Google era. And maybe you never know, maybe it'll come sometime. But thank you again so much for this
Thank,
absolutely incredible conversation.
thank you so much, Ashutosh, for having me. It's been an incredible honor. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.